Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching Newsx World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. A military trainer jet crashed into a school campus in Dhaka, killing at least 19 people. Over 50 others, including children, were burnt and hospitalized. Israeli forces have entered central Gaza's Deir al-Balah, a haven for thousands of displaced civilians. The ground push was backed by airstrikes as Israel targets areas where hostages may be held. Israeli airstrikes destroyed a recently rebuilt dock at Hodeidah port in Yemen, according to a Houthi security official. The Israeli army said it targeted military infrastructure and naval vessels used for combat purposes. Russian drones and missiles have hit the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, killing 2 and damaging homes, a nursery and metro shelters. Ukrainian President Zelensky called it an assault on humanity as France's top diplomat arrived to condemn the strikes. Tehran will hold trilateral talks with China and Russia on Tuesday over its nuclear program. The meeting comes amid European warnings of possible sanctions. Islamist fighters in northwest Pakistan are using commercially available drones to drop bombs on security forces. Police say the tactics marks a dangerous escalation in the insurgency. Iran will meet European powers on Friday in Turkey for fresh talks on its nuclear program after recent US airstrikes on Iranian facilities. The three nations warned sanctions could be reimposed if Iran refuses to cooperate. Torrential rainfall in South Korea has left at least 18 people dead and 9 missing, according to the Interior Ministry. The worst-hit regions continue to struggle with damage from floods and landslides. Now for our top story, we start in the United States. The Trump administration is setting a tougher tone on China and Russia ahead of a crucial August the 1st deadline. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said trade talks with Beijing will resume very soon, but warned that China's continued imports of sanctioned Iranian and Russian oil remain a major issue. Bessent added that any failure to secure deals could trigger sharper tariffs, a move he would say pressures nations to negotiate fairer terms. He also called on Europe to stand with the US if Washington imposes secondary tariffs on Moscow. We're now joined by Dr. Ajay Dua, who's a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay, for joining us on the program. What do you make of these future talks between China and the US? What are your further thoughts?
Thank you for having me on your show.
Of course.
I think it was a very, I would say, a wise statement coming from the Treasury Secretary that we're not really over-concerned about the deadlines of the various deadlines which have been set up by the President or set by President Trump in the last few weeks. But we want a good trade deal. That's what the background which Mr. Bessent gave while talking about what might happen with China or with Russia. Second point, I think, which he made, which you're referring to, is that China could invite itself, China and other countries could invite themselves as secondary sanctions or secondary tariffs, as he put it, in case they continue to import oil from Russia and Iran. This is something which the United States had been making it clear, and President Trump, in his usual style, has said it could be even 500%, and now it's being talked about at 100%. or so. But in that, I do see a degree of consistency ever since the sanctions were imposed upon Russia when it launched the war with, or started off its conflict with Ukraine more than 3 years ago. Having said that, all that I'd like to say is that the way to go about is probably what the Treasury Secretary has put it very cogently today, or was it yesterday, and not pressurize countries to say, you come to a deal by such and such deadline, which is now 1st of August, or else you would be inviting yourself uh, all kinds of higher tax than other restrictions which are being talked about. That's if an agreement has to be sustained over time, and we're not talking for a short-term agreements being effected between the two countries. These have to be kind of deliberated upon and mutually beneficial, certainly, but those should not be really, as they say, pushed down the throat of the other party.
Dr. Jua, who do you think holds the upper hand here when it comes to these talks going into them, especially with China continuing to buy sanctioned oil?
I'm not sure if the United States has an upper hand. And I say this with a degree of diffidence, but the reason being that there is a huge dependence of United States upon China. Yes, China also needs a whole lot of things from the United States, including technology, including certain vital materials which come there for it to complete its process of manufacturing and other activities. But the trade deficit is of the United States. United States cannot make the things as quickly, as large volumes, and as competitively as China does. So that, to my mind, it continues to be a bit of the scenario is still in favor of United States. United States will be hurting itself if it imposes, say, 100% duty on imports from China, merely because it's trading with Russia or with trading in Russian oil or the Iranian oil, because the goods which the US needs from China would consequently become more expensive. It will be the United States which will be paying for it to the customers in the United States, and not necessarily Chinese themselves.
Well, that leads well onto my next question, Dr. Jua. How could sharper tariffs backfire on American consumers and industry, particularly at this time of economic and geopolitical uncertainty?
Easily. I think that would be the next step. The United States, certainly in the short run, cannot start producing goods which it imports from a host of countries, and particularly China. The US has to realize, and I'm sure they do, and sage people like Scott Bessent and many others in the government, the US, do realize that United States' comparative advantage is no longer in manufacturing. It's moved to services. And one data which I came by just a couple of days ago, it said the biggest employer in the United States now is the healthcare sector, not manufacturing or no other form of activity, but healthcare for themselves and largely for themselves. That's what's keeping the United States going. And healthcare, as we know, is largely services. So yes, in course of time, the United States could get some bit of its manufacturing back, but it's going to take time. And so to that extent, any tariffs, any restrictions upon meaning the kind of trade which we have, it's no longer very free as it was earlier with the impositions coming from all over both sides or all sides. but it would certainly impinge upon the consumers of the United States. They are the ones who would have to pay, and as of now, the economy of the US is not doing badly at all. The inflation is also under control. But
Yes.
these things could change overnight if most of the goods, United States, which come into its territory, are subjected to tariffs of various kinds, and China also is hit with secondary tariffs because one of the inputs, which it has raw materials, so to say, for its processing and manufacturing, is imported oil from these two countries.
Yes, Dr. Jua, you are staying with us for further related updates. We now move on. US Secretary Treasury Scott Bessent says the Trump administration is prioritizing the quality of trade deals over deadlines just days before a crucial August the 1st tariff cutoff. Speaking to CNBC, Bessent said Washington won't rush agreements just to meet a timetable, adding that President Trump will decide whether to extend the deadline for countries engaged in productive talks. If negotiations fail, Bessent warned that higher tariffs could be reimposed to increase pressure on global partners. He also commented on Japan, saying Washington is focused on the best deal rather than internal Japanese politics. On Europe, he warned growing engagement and said the EU may want to negotiate faster. The administration continues to evaluate possible exemptions, including in the aviation sector, but made it clear that high-stakes trade strategy will remain a Trump call. Furthermore, according to reports, India's trade team is back to India, and a deal with the US is likely by September to October. We're once again joined by Dr. Jua to discuss this further. Dr. Jua, what are your thoughts here? What are your thoughts in Donald Trump's negotiating tactics? We've seen different approaches to different countries. We had a 90-day pause in these tariffs for deals to get done. We saw 2 deals done in that time with the United Kingdom and with Vietnam. Donald Trump has now said that he will give extensions or exemptions on these tariffs based on productive talks. What are your thoughts of his methodology here?
I think short term his strategy might work, his tactics might succeed, but I'm not sure. Pushing people into a corner and saying that either you go by what I'm saying, you enter into a bilateral agreement with the United States, or you would attract impositions, higher tariffs, and other kind of restrictions upon your trade. And that dependence which Vietnam has upon the US, we all know that, and they accepted it. The Vietnam government has accepted it, though it's yet to be seen how, if the doubling of the duties on transshipments through Vietnam, which basically the US administration was alluding to the trade which takes place of Chinese goods through Vietnam, that will attract a much higher duty, how it would actually fan out, because the consequences there would be exactly what we were discussing a little while ago. The burden of is going to be upon the US consumer. Yes, the Treasury might make some money when the goods cross the borders, but at the end of it, it is going to be dampening on the US economy. You also talked about the trade deal with United Kingdom. Yes, UK has an ally of the US for a very long time during the last World War. Since then, the trade has been sizable, and the defense transactions between the two countries are humongous.
Dr. Jua, critics of Donald Trump's methodology when it comes to his economic policy have described it as protectionism and unilateral bullying. There's also been allegations of Donald Trump using trade deals in terms of negotiating peace deals Particularly, there's been allegations that he used one in regards to the India-Pakistan conflict, both of which have denied that, obviously. However, what's your response to Donald Trump using these trade deals in the way that he does, that people have described them as bullying, as protectionism?
I think President Trump, I'm sorry to say that, is using trade as a weapon. A weapon for bringing about peace. It might sound a little contradictory, but weaponizing trade, and here on the one hand we say China should not be doing it, China should not be using the advantages which it has in, say, rare earths, certain rare earths, and minerals, and other kind of things which has its advantages in, and it should let free trade prevail. It should go by the WTO's regime, that it's a regime for free trade, but on its own, he's exactly doing the opposite.
Yes.
Telling the countries, agree quickly, otherwise the earlier impositions which were there, those will come back. The ones prior to April, or that was in, I think sometimes in April, when he gave 90 days window to countries to negotiate, etc. I would say yes, in the short run, again I make a distinction that immediate run it might benefit the US, their coffers will fill up because the duties are higher, but anything beyond that, I don't see any advantage for the US economy. Recession could set in, inflation could be there. Contradictory, what I'm saying, recession and inflation usually don't go together, but you can have a situation when not enough economic activity takes place, and the high tariffs which he imposes have to be paid for by the US consumer because they have no other option. So I am not at all for negotiating long-term trade arrangements by using deadlines, by using imposing higher tariffs, and those kind of things, which you are forcing yourself, your successors, as well as the other governments with whom you are talking, that you could bring about lower rates of growth there, and those countries could also get hit by sort of a stagflation or a recession. And who's the winner? Nobody, neither the United States nor the countries with which it is trading, and the world's economy would slow down, unfortunately.
Yes, Dr. R.J. Dewar, thank you very much for your insight on that topic. We now move on to another US-related development where the future of the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, remains uncertain as US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent avoided commenting on speculation over his removal. Speaking to CNBC, Bessent said he wouldn't deal in hypotheticals, noting Powell's term ends in May with another slot opening as early as January. He added the entire Federal Reserve institution needs to be examined. The comments follow a Wall Street Journal report claiming Bessent advised President Trump against firing Powell. But Trump hit back on Truth Social, denying the story and stressing that he alone knows what's best for the markets and the nation. The president said, "People don't explain to me, I explain to them." We're now joined by Scott Faulkner, who is the head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm, and he joins us live from Washington. Scott, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Scott, what do you make of this loggerheads it seems to be between Scott Bessent and the FED chair and Trump and the FED chair? The uncertainty surrounding Jerome Powell, is this political pressure or a genuine reevaluation of the FED?
I think it's a little bit of both. There's been talk for a number of years by Senator Rand Paul and others to actually do a full audit of the Federal Reserve for a number of reasons. But the key is that Trump wants to continue to energize the U.S. economy. He thinks that with rates as high as they are and inflation coming down, that basically the Federal Reserve is not with the program. But there are limitations. There is no way to remove a Federal Reserve chair unless they're caught in some sort of illegality, and he's not doing anything illegal. And as you mentioned, his term is up next May, and so Trump is basically trying to, I think, browbeat the Fed into doing something that he wants, but the Fed really has no reason to listen to him.
Scott, do you think Donald Trump is overstepping the mark with his public statements surrounding Jerome Powell? Public statements to fire him over a semi-independent entity here. What are your thoughts on the US president's behavior, both online and given to the press, in regards to how the FED is dealing with the Federal Reserve?
Well, I think any public official doesn't like bad media. And so the more that Trump talks about Powell being not with the program, harming the economy, it may force Powell's hand. I mean, again, the Federal Reserve is not just a unitary state. You have the districts, and each of those district heads have a vote when they set the rates. And so it's possible that he's trying to speak to the broader Federal Reserve panel, not just to Powell himself. But in either case, again, unless Powell is caught doing something illegal, Trump's real options are very limited.
Yes, Scott, we are going to move on, but you are staying with us to discuss further US updates. Elon Musk's social network X has dismissed a French investigation into alleged foreign interference and algorithmic bias as politically motivated. In a statement, X condemned the probe, claiming it distorted French law to advance a political agenda and restrict free speech. The company refused to comply with French authorities' demands to access its recommendation algorithm and real-time data, citing legal protections. The investigation, which began on July the 11th, follows accusations from French lawmakers, including Eric Bothorol, that Musk's platform manipulates content to influence politics. X has denied the allegations and criticized the selection of experts involved in the probe, citing concerns over their impartiality. We're once again joined by Scott Faulkner to discuss this in further details. Scott, how serious are these allegations of foreign interference on X? These algorithmic claims of algorithmic bias, and do you think they warrant a national investigation?
Well, X, which used to be called Twitter, was accused of bias in America. That's one of the reasons why Musk bought it in the first place, was that the old Twitter, which was very left focused, was manipulating the algorithms to suppress things like the Hunter laptop and other stories that would be benefiting the Republicans. So this is not a new allegation against this platform. What's happening, though, in France is that now the shoe is sort of on the other foot, that France is saying that X is now manipulating it in ways affecting French politics, the same way that Musk and others accused the old Twitter of manipulating algorithms to affect US politics. There's certainly a lot of seriousness to it because France can literally deplatform the platform. They could close X out of France. And so I think at some point Musk has got to cooperate in some way.
Scott, obviously Elon Musk used to hold this unelected but very, very high-ranking position in the Trump government. He also owns X, formerly Twitter, as you've mentioned now, which has over 1 billion users on it. He's also backed political parties, far-right political parties, mainly in Europe, very openly. Do you see this problematic at all? Do you think there should be some sort of new legislation brought in, some new checks brought in to ensure that disinformation in this context isn't mishandled?
Well, again, we're back to the issue of freedom of the press. That, again, back during the Biden era, they were talking about misinformation to try to stop certain actual facts from getting out regarding COVID, regarding the vaccine, regarding, again, the Hunter laptop platform, laptop and all those. So the key is that the moment that government steps in to try to do censorship, it can shape reality to basically the detriment of the people. So it's a fine line between saying these platforms are abusing their power and manipulating their algorithms. It's quite another to say that some government bureaucrat or some politician should do it instead. I don't think that, I mean, again, the marketplace for ideas is all about clicks. But on the other hand, we look at the other part of it. Musk is a private citizen. He can promote whoever he wants in any country he wants, as saying, I like this person, I don't like that person, I like that party, I don't like this party. That should be viewed as totally separate from the actual algorithms being used on X.
Yes, indeed. Scott Faulkner, thank you very much for joining us on the program as always. We now move on, where Pope Leo spoke to the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, amid the raging conflict in Gaza. As per reports, the two spoke about the prevailing situation in the Gaza Strip and has raised concerns recently. It was the first official conversation between the two men since Leo's papacy began. Reporting on the call, the Vatican has said that the Pope emphasized the urgent need to provide assistance to those most vulnerable to the consequences of the conflict and to allow adequate entry of humanitarian aid. It followed a call on July the 18th between the Pope and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a day after a strike on Israel, on Gaza's only Catholic church that killed 3 people. On July the 20th, Pope Leo condemned the barbarity of the war in Gaza and again called for a peaceful resolution. We're now joined by, apologies, we had technical issues there. We are now joined by Ahmed Fatwa, who's the spokesperson for the Fatah movement. He's located in Ramallah. Thank you very much, Ahmad, for joining us on the program once again. Ahmad, what do you think the significance here is of Pope Leo speaking to both Israeli and Palestinian leaders so close together? Do you think the Vatican is taking a more active role in this peace diplomacy? He has very much spoken against the war in Gaza and ongoing, and called for peace multiple times. What are your thoughts, Ahmed?
Thank you for having me. Of course, the situation in Palestine is catastrophic. That needs everybody's attention, and the Pope was very quick to call for ending this brutality, this madness, this genocide, this man-made starvation in Gaza. Right now in Gaza, people are falling in streets, fainting, and falling in streets from hunger and malnutrition. I can't believe that I'm speaking this in 2025, when we have reached the moon, when we have space projects, when we have a humanitarian law, but yet we have this barbaric starvation before our eyes for 22 months, and we are still waiting for an action. Pope spoke from his heart, from his belief in God and his faith for humanity to end this madness. And the President Mahmoud Abbas issued today an appeal, an urgent appeal, calling all leaders to stop this madness. Enough is enough. Israel is doing a crime that is unspeakable. It's inconceivable that is still going on. We are all seeing aid seekers being shot at in a very sadistic, grotesque war crime, and this is still continuing. 1,000 aid seekers died to find a piece of bread. Hungry, starved people are dying and being shot at. And the world is watching. The world is inactive. Where is the United Nations? Where's the European Union? Where's the Islamic nation? Where's Asia? Where's the
Ahmed,
world? We are asking.
Ahmed, obviously this came in direct response to the church that was struck, the only church in the region. How have you thought that Christian-led nations have reacted to this? What has been your analysis of that? Obviously, we've seen the likes of Giorgia Meloni speak out, the Prime Minister of Italy. We've also seen the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics around the world now consistently actually speaking out against the war in Gaza. Are they doing enough?
No, they are not doing enough. We are only hearing condemnation, statements, words. Where's the action? They all sell and have trade deals with Israel. Some of them sell guns. Why that did not stop? Where's the sanctions against Israel that is doing war crime for the past 22 months? Where is that? Israel bombed the only Catholic church in Gaza, the only Catholic church in Gaza. And it harbored refugees. This is a war crime that is beyond words. Last year they bombed one of the most ancient churches of Palestine in Gaza. Israel does not respect anything, does not respect religious places, does not respect schools, hospitals, children, even toddlers. They don't care. We all have seen the witnesses and testimonies from doctors, international doctors, who said about how Israel is sniping children in the chest, on the head. Where is the word from that?
Ahmed, the Israeli government said that this attack on this strike on this church was a mistake. They said they are going to look into it with an investigation. How effective do you think this investigation by the IDF is going to be?
We hear that words. You tell me. How many times you heard them? What mistakes, what investigation? They will never do anything. Without the consequences, nothing will take place. We are asking the criminal to investigate his own crime. Are we serious? I'm really upset that this is happening in 2025. My people are dying on streets. Where is the word? And I'm here on your platform sending this appeal, calling upon world conscience. People are dying from hunger. Children are dying. 70 child died from hunger. It is few miles away. Where is the humanity? And we are waiting for Israel to investigate. Are we serious? The colonizer, the criminal, the one who brag about killing children?
Yes, Ahmed.
I have no words of what's going on. I have no words. And I'm waiting for the world to act. Immediately stop this war, this man, this genocide, this criminality against our people for no reason. It has no political reason. It has nothing to do with Hamas. It has only to do with killing and an extermination campaign against people. I call upon the world conscience to step up. Enough. Enough is enough.
Ahmed Fatwa, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Your insight is very much valued. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.